What is going on, movie fans? James Patrick here, and in this ranked video, we're going to be looking at all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, ranked from the absolute worst all the way up to the best of the best. And there were 9 films that I looked at, and I didn't realize going in as I was making this list and watching this movie how convoluted the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series was. I mean, you have 3 movies named the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have 2 movies named Leatherface. They exist in 3 different canons, and you even have a 3D movie to top it all off. It is very confusing, and there's no real clear chronology to these movies. And the only franchise I can think that is more confusing than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise is if you were to try to piece together the Halloween series. But there it is. So when I'm looking at these films, we're looking at a handful of things, from how entertaining is the movie, the quality of the filming and the cinematography, the sound design, the editing. We're looking at how good Leatherface was. Was the movie scary? Was it original? How good's the final girl? And overall, was this an enjoyable experience to watch? So with all of our ranked videos, we start all the way at the bottom. And at the bottom, in last place, in 9th place out of the 9 movies, is Leatherface. This is from 2017. And honestly, this is an origin story that no one ever asked for. And it's very clear they took/stole their inspiration from Rob Zombie's take on the Halloween reboot, which is, let's just take a white trash family and let's amplify it. And through that amplification, we will create our antagonist. Now, they also tried to do something that really, I one, didn't understand, two, no one wanted, or no one was really asking for, that I could see, is they tried to also make Leatherface the protagonist as well as the antagonist. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. There are characters in the movie, they exist, but it's really impossible to tell who's who, or really why any of this storyline is even happening. And to top it off, you just have really atrocious cinematography. So it's just not an enjoyable movie to watch. So I actually had this film ranked in the single digits on a scale of 0 to 100. I gave it around a 6%. This was a really, really tough film to watch. Okay, let's get just slightly a little bit better. The jump in quality goes up, like, my scores are objective to myself, subjective to you. But when I ranked Leatherface, I have it at a 6%, and now we're jumping up 32%. So we are jumping up quite a bit, but this still isn't a good movie, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Next Generation. And think of this like Prom Night meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the things that I found so perplexing about this movie is, if you're looking at the quote unquote villain or the bad guy, like the Sawyer family, as a unit, are the antagonists in the film, but the character of Vilmer, played by Matthew McConaughey, is far more lethal and far more dangerous and far more the main villain than Leatherface. And even when you look at the kill count, I can only find one kill that I would associate with Leatherface, and Vilmer had 4 times that amount. That being said, they're just rehashing a lot of stuff that we've seen in previous movies, like we saw in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but they're doing it in a way that's not as good, not as scary, not as effective, and with characters that we just don't like as much. Really bad script, really cliche characters. They try to introduce this cabal concept of this underground organization that uses the Sawyer family to appease them somehow. It's just not that interesting, and it just doesn't work. So that is our number 8 spot. So moving up to number 7, we have another origin film. Second origin movie, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. Now in this canon, Leatherface's name is Tommy, but in another canon, he has a different name. But in this canon, Leatherface's name is Tommy. And this movie is just so uncomfortably formulaic, predictable, gross over scary. But that being said, they bring back Arlie Ermey's character. He played the sheriff in the reboot, the 2003 reboot. In this film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really a prequel to the reboot from 2003, even though it was made after. Um, and they really focus on Arlie Ermey's character as one of the main characters in this film and how he became to be the sheriff. And they really try to tell as much of the story of the Sawyer family as they can. It is a far better prequel than the Leatherface prequel. Arlie Ermey is a lot of fun to watch, but outside of that, that's about it. So you're going to get some enjoyment from seeing Arlie Ermey, who's is amazing in whatever he does, and that's about the extent of what you're going to get from this film. All right, moving up to the number 6 spot is we have the third film in the original series, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. When I saw this, my first thought was, "Oh wow, Leatherface is on Ozempic." This is a very thin, very in shape Leatherface compared to the more portly displays that we've had in Leatherface with some of the other characters or actors who played him. They expanded on the Sawyer family in this one. Uh, this is definitely a movie of its time. The soundtrack, the heavy metal soundtrack, the lighting, the hair, the style, everything about this movie screams were of this specific period in time. I will say the Tex character, played by Viggo Mortensen, is really good. I thought that was a really fun character. There didn't seem to be a lot of connection, even though this was the third installment. There didn't seem to be much connection or tethering to the first two movies. This was the first one that was not directed by Toby Hooper. That being said, it's kind of fun. It was kind of a fun watch. Is it a great movie? No, this is not a great movie. But it was not unenjoyable to watch. It's Leatherface is pretty intense. You got a really, really, really great final girl in it. You have a heavy metal montage scene. I mean, like I said, it is a movie of its time, and I didn't mind watching it. Okay, moving up to the number 5 spot is the reboot. Not reboot. I guess a sequel. A sequel named the Texas Chainsaw Massacre off the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. So I think it ignores kind of everything after 1974. A lot of people didn't like this movie. And when I first watched it, I didn't like it either. But in rewatching it, I did score it higher than some of the others for a couple different reasons. Um, when we start off the movie, the part that frustrates me is you have like this obvious exposition through kind of like a TV newscast. The story itself, the entire premise of the movie doesn't make sense. The characters don't make sense. They have this idea of gentrification, but they don't really seem to understand what gentrification is or how gentrification works. But it's really shoehorned in like, oh, this is a movie, where the first movie was kind of about uh, PTSD and being a veteran, post Vietnam War. This movie is just all about the gentrification of certain areas of America. And okay, but it doesn't really work. And you have no clear protagonist. You just have a whole host of really annoying characters, truly annoying characters. But what are the benefits? Well, it's a pretty intense film when it comes to action and gore. A lot happens in the movie. Leatherface is very aggressive in this movie. It's a very violent movie. So if you're into it for that, it is a fun watch when it comes to that element. I mean, the kill scenes are really intense, really brutal. This is a very violent Leatherface. I even love the subtlety of the poster that we're showing, I guess right over here, where you just see, on first glance, all you see is the sunflowers. And then, when you look closer, you see Leatherface's face kind of hiding behind the sun flare. I actually enjoy, and maybe guilty pleasure, but I actually enjoyed watching this on the second time. I will say it's unfortunate that they wasted bringing back the Sally character. That was kind of just, that was such a waste. That was such a member berries throwback. But overall, like it was okay, and that's kind of why it's in the middle of the list here. All right, moving up to number 4, and all of a sudden we're like getting much higher in scoring. Um, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D. The premise of this one is, what if Leatherface was just misunderstood? They actually make the bad guys in this film all the townspeople who are trying to kill the Sawyer family, because that makes sense that they're the bad guys. No, of course it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense if you completely ignore everything the Sawyer family did in any of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, but specifically the first one. Like the Sawyer family butchered those kids. They attacked them. They ate them. I mean, that was, so it's like, okay, let's ignore that and let's just pretend that Leatherface was misunderstood. And maybe he's actually just a, a, a peaceful giant that, as long as we leave him alone, he won't hurt anyone. And he's just protecting his house and his family. He's protecting his bloodline. Okay. Moving the premise aside and moving how silly the characters are aside and moving how cringe the dialogue is, and this movie gets slammed a lot for its cringe dialogue. One, you have amazing, really cool, inventive kill scenes. You have a phenomenal Leatherface, a really, really intimidating, scary, aggressive Leatherface. Um, and the pacing made the movie fun to watch. It's not a bad movie. It has bad elements, like the premise of the movie is silly. Like, what if Leatherface was a good guy? Let's make the bad guys the townspeople who are trying to stop this serial murderer and cannibal. Like, I don't know what universe this film exists in, but it is a fun, like, guilty pleasure movie to watch. I enjoyed watching it. I think I'd seen it once before. Some elements looked familiar, but I did enjoy it on the rewatch. Okay, let's move into the top 3. At number 3 comes the reboot from 2003. Um, this, I mean, clearly this is going to take all the best hits of the first movie and try to rehash those. And to be clear, it does not rehash the first movie better. That's why you haven't seen the first movie yet on this list. We're going from worst to best. But it does do some things well. I think really good casting, really good characters. They're very memorable. You definitely get a sense of who they are, what their motivations are. There is backstory to the characters that doesn't feel forced in, that feels natural. This is the first one that Arlie Ermy steps in to play the sheriff role, who is phenomenal, chef's kiss, amazing in this. They paid homage to the original film, by doing the same exact framing of certain scenes. And to me, that's not lazy per se, and that's not copying per se. Like, you can copy concepts, but when you frame something identically, for a 1 second scene, you're doing that as an homage. That's, you're not trying to rip something off. You're showing respect for what came before. And there was a few elements of that, not major scenes, but little cuts, little filler scenes, that were done that I thought were, oh, okay, that was a nice addition, because I remember that same framing from the first movie. Um, uh, Another thing I'll say about this is, like, really great lighting and pretty decent cinematography. Not the best cinematography, but pretty decent. A lot of my one complaint was a lot of fast cuts, but overall, like, really cool camera angles. It really kind of puts you in with the characters because of how close they were framing a lot of the shots. The final girl Erin is so good in this movie. So there's a lot to like about this movie. I liked it when it came out, and I still like it now on the rewatch. I thought this was really fun. All right, moving on to number 2, as we have number 2. Um, how do you follow up one of the most terrifying movies ever made? I mean, still considered to this day to be one of, if not the scariest movie ever made, and even touted as being a perfect, like Quentin Tarantino labels it as one of the only perfect movies ever made. How do you follow up from that when you're cast to do a sequel, which Toby Hopper was made to do the sequel? Is you go a completely different direction. So that's what Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is. It is a different take on a similar theme. It plays more for laughs, so it's the antithesis of the original. It's wild, it's over the top, and even though there's a strong comedy element to this movie, it still doesn't skimp on the horror or the scary element of this. There are moments that it's still scary. I think the character selection in this movie is outstanding. Bill Moseley as Chop Top is brilliant. The final girl, Stretch, is so freaking good. It's obviously more polished in the cinematography and the light design and how it's filmed than the original, because the original is so raw and native feeling. Dennis Hopper is delightful. I mean, you have a chainsaw sword fight. Like, that's what I mean when I say this movie is over the top. It is the Evil Dead 2 of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. And for those who've seen Evil Dead, you understand exactly what I mean by that reference. It's such a fun movie. It's so well paced. It's so well constructed. And it's such a enjoyable experience to be able to watch it over and over and over again. So I rank Texas Chainsaw Massacre at number 2, which leaves us to number 1. You can't beat this one. You just can't. It's iconic. So many elements of this movie are copied and imitated by other films, and the most uncomfortable, intentionally uncomfortable cinematography. The terrifying elements of this movie are not just the Leather family or Leatherface and the Sawyer family. It's how real this movie feels, how real they made it look with the lighting and the choice of camera angles and the sound design. This movie is scary. It is terrifying to watch. It still makes me uncomfortable, and I've seen it a handful of times. Is it perfect? I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think it's a great movie and one of the best prototypical slasher films that exists. Could there have been elements that could have been done better? Sure. I didn't care for a lot of the characters. Most of them are forgettable, with the exception of Sally or the exception of Franklin. Everyone else is kind of, to me, throwaway. I will say, when it comes to Final Girls, when we think of Final Girls, like, a lot will think of Sally as, like, once again, a prototypical Final Girl. I would say she was more lucky than smart or savvy, and I wouldn't say she had an arc. I don't think she became stronger in the movie. She just seemed to get lucky and escape. But here's something I really liked about this movie is the protagonist, or excuse me, the antagonist in Leatherface. They made him fallible. I thought that was really interesting. They didn't make him indestructible. They didn't make him without mistake. He was human. He made error, but yet that made him even more scary because it added to I think, the mystique and the curiosity of his motivations. But overall, like, this movie felt so real. And because it felt so real, that's why it's close number 2 got in scoring. And number 2 was scored really high. You just can't beat number 1. It stands alone. It is iconic. It exists for a reason. It's the reason why we've had 8+ sequels or spin-offs or reboots. So there it is. There's the list of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies ranked from worst to best. I'm curious how my rankings compare to yours. Let me know in the comments section below. As always, appreciate your subscription to the channel. Really helps the channel out. So thank you so much in advance for that. We have some upcoming lists that I got to film. I got so many lists to do. I got to do like we just ranked all the Hellraiser movies, but I got to rank the Pinheads or the Cenobites in the Hellraiser movies. We have some Final Girl lists we have to do. I did just watch all of the Final Destination movies as well. I'm starting on the Scream series right now. Lot of rankings coming up. So stay tuned for those. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you all in the next screening. Take care, everyone.